Imaginationland's Lost Pages. Chapter 1. The Book in the Attic. Butters, you get your butt down here right now. You're going to be late for school. Linda Stotch called up the stairs, her voice tinged with the familiar edge of parental frustration. "Coming, Mom," Butters replied, frantically searching under his bed for his other shoe. The blond boy had overslept after staying up well past his bedtime working on a special art project for class. If his parents found out he'd been awake past 8:30 p.m., he'd surely be grounded. Finally locating the missing shoe behind his dresser, Butters quickly tied the laces and grabbed his backpack. He paused at his desk, looking fondly at the elaborate diorama he'd created. A miniature version of Imaginationland, complete with tiny paper figures of all his favorite characters. The mayor with his colorful top hat stood in the center, surrounded by various creatures from fairy tales, movies, and TV shows. 4 years had passed since the boys' incredible adventure in Imaginationland, where imagination itself had come to life, and they had battled the evil imaginary characters to save the good ones. Sometimes Butters wondered if it had all been a dream, though Stan, Kyle, and even Cartman occasionally referenced the experience. Nobody talked about it much anymore, but Butters often thought about that magical place. Hurrying downstairs, Butters wolfed down his breakfast while his father Stephen read the morning newspaper, occasionally shaking his head at some troubling headline. "All set for your big presentation today, Butters?" his father asked without looking up. "Yes, sir. I made a diorama of Imaginationland. It's got all sorts of neat characters and—" "Imaginationland." Stephen lowered his newspaper, frowning. "Is that from one of those Japanese cartoons? You know how we feel about those, mister." "Oh no, Dad. It's—" Butters stopped himself. His parents had no memory of the government bringing him home after the whole Imaginationland incident. As far as they knew, he'd just been playing with his friends that weekend. "It's just something I made up." "Well, as long as it's wholesome," his mother said, placing a packed lunch in his hands. "Now hurry up or you'll miss the bus." The morning at South Park Elementary proceeded as usual. Mr. Garrison was teaching the 4th graders about celebrity relationships instead of the American Revolution. PC Principal was giving motivational announcements over the intercom, and Cartman was hatching some scheme involving making money off the lower grades' lunch tickets. When it came time for presentations, Butters proudly displayed his Imaginationland diorama. As he explained the different sections and characters, Kyle and Stan exchanged knowing glances, while Cartman rolled his eyes. "And this here is the gumdrop forest, where Princess Yum Yum lives," Butters pointed enthusiastically. "And over here is the mayor's castle and the lollipop kingdom and—" "Thank you, Butters," Mr. Garrison interrupted. "That's very creative, though I'm not sure what this has to do with my summer vacation," which was the actual assignment. "Oh, hamburgers," Butters muttered, realizing he'd completely misunderstood the project. After school, as Butters was carefully placing his diorama in his locker, he felt a tap on his shoulder. "Hey man, that was pretty cool," Stan said, with Kyle and Kenny nodding beside him. "Yeah, you got a lot of the details right," Kyle added. "It's almost like you took photos when we were there." "Weak presentation, though," Cartman interjected, appearing behind them. "You didn't even include the part where I saved everyone's ass from the terrorists." "You didn't save anyone, fat ass," Kyle retorted. "If I remember correctly, you were too busy trying to get me to." "Anyway," Stan interrupted, "it made me kind of miss that place, you know." Despite all the crazy stuff that happened, Butters nodded enthusiastically. "Sometimes I dream I'm back there, and the mayor is showing me around, and all the characters are having a big all-party." "Well, it's not like we can go back," Stan sighed. "The portal was a military operation or something." The boys parted ways, heading home for the afternoon. Butters wasn't ready to go home yet. A C- on his presentation meant his parents would almost certainly ground him. Instead, he decided to visit his favorite place in South Park, a small hill overlooking Stark's Pond where he often went to think. As he climbed the gentle slope, Butters noticed something unusual, a large oak tree that he could have sworn wasn't there before. Beneath its spreading branches sat an old man with a long white beard, wearing what looked like a bathrobe and a wizard hat. "Hello there, young imagination," the old man called out cheerfully. Butters approached cautiously. South Park had its share of strange people, but there was something oddly familiar about this man. Hello, sir. Are you from around here?" Butters asked. The old man chuckled. "I am from everywhere and nowhere, my boy. I am wherever imagination lives." He tapped the side of his nose knowingly. "And I believe you've been to my homeland before, Leopoldstadt." Butters gasped. "You're from Imaginationland, but how did you get here? And how do you know my name?" "I am the keeper of pages," the old man explained, producing an enormous leather-bound book from somewhere within his robes. "And while the mayor oversees Imaginationland itself, I maintain its stories, its histories, and its connections to your world." He looked at Butters with twinkling eyes. "As for how I know you, why, everyone in Imaginationland knows the boy who was brave enough to face the woodland critters." Butters blushed at the praise. "Gee whiz, that wasn't just me. My friends helped too." "Indeed they did," the keeper nodded solemnly. "And I'm afraid I must ask for your help and theirs once again. Imaginationland is facing a new crisis, one that threatens not just our realm but yours as well." The old man opened his book, and to Butters' amazement, the pages began to glow with a soft blue light. Images moved across the paper like a television screen, showing familiar sights of Imaginationland. But something was wrong. Entire sections of the colorful landscape were fading, becoming transparent or dissolving into nothingness. "What's happening to it?" Butters asked, alarmed. "The lost pages," the keeper explained gravely. "Central parts of our realm are disappearing because the stories that sustain them are being forgotten in your world. Without imagination to power them, these realms fade into oblivion, taking their characters with them." "That's terrible," Butters exclaimed. "Worse still," the keeper continued, "is what's happening to the forgotten characters." He turned to a different page, showing shadowy, distorted versions of once friendly imaginary beings. "They become forgotten ones, neither good nor evil, but lost and confused, desperate to be remembered. Some have found a way to cross into your world, trying to make people remember them." "Is that dangerous?" Butters asked nervously. "Very. Forgotten characters will do anything to be remembered, even frightening or harming real people, if they think it will imprint them on your memories." The keeper closed his book with a heavy sigh. "We need you and your friends to come to Imaginationland and help us recover the lost pages before more characters are forgotten and find their way here." "But how would we even get there?" Butters asked. "Last time the government had that big machine thing." The keeper smiled mysteriously and reached into his robe, pulling out what looked like an ordinary snow globe. Inside was a perfect miniature version of Imaginationland, with tiny figures moving about. "Pure imagination needs no machines," he said, handing the globe to Butters. "This will open the way when the time is right. Gather your friends at your home tomorrow night. When you are all together, shake the globe and think of Imaginationland. The portal will open." Butters took the snow globe carefully, watching the miniature world inside swirl with colors. "But what if my parents ground me?" "They probably will after my bad grade today." The keeper winked. "Don't worry about that. Parents have imagination too, even if they've forgotten how to use it." With that cryptic statement, the old man stood and walked behind the oak tree. When Butters hurried to follow, he found no one there. Both the keeper and the tree had vanished completely. Butters stood alone on the hill, clutching the snow globe, his mind racing. He had to convince his friends to help, and somehow avoid being grounded long enough to save Imaginationland. Looking down at the magical object in his hands, he whispered, "Don't worry, Mayor. We're coming back." As if in response, the tiny mayor inside the snow globe looked up and tipped his hat. Chapter 2. Return to Imaginationland. Convincing his friends proved easier than Butters had anticipated. Stan and Kyle were immediately intrigued by the snow globe and the story of the Keeper of Pages. Kenny, his voice muffled through his orange parka, seemed excited about the prospect of another adventure. Even Cartman, despite his initial skepticism, couldn't resist the allure of returning to Imaginationland, a place where he had briefly wielded godlike powers through the force of his imagination. "So let me get this straight," Kyle said, as the five boys gathered in Butters' bedroom the following evening. "Parts of Imaginationland are disappearing because people are forgetting about certain imaginary characters." "That's right," Butters nodded, carefully placing the snow globe on his desk. "And the forgotten characters are turning into these scary shadow things that might come into our world." "That's stupid," Cartman scoffed. "If they're forgotten, they should just disappear. That's how imagination works." "Actually, Eric," Butters replied, uncharacteristically confident, "the keeper said that imaginary things don't just disappear. They change form when they're forgotten, but they still exist somewhere." Stan picked up the snow globe, examining the miniature world inside. "It's kind of sad when you think about it. All those characters that nobody remembers anymore, just waiting in some void. Like that old cartoon with the elephant. What was it called?" Kyle pondered. "Exactly," Butters exclaimed. "When was the last time anyone thought about that elephant? But he's still out there somewhere in Imaginationland, probably all sad and forgotten." Kenny mumbled something through his hood that sounded like, "I remember that elephant." "Well, are we doing this or what?" Cartman demanded impatiently. "If we're going to save Imaginationland, let's get on with it. I've got Terrence and Philip reruns to watch later." Butters took the snow globe back from Stan. "Okay, fellas, the keeper said we all need to be touching the globe when I shake it, and we have to think really hard about Imaginationland." The boys gathered around in a circle, each placing a finger on the glass sphere. "Everyone thinking about Imaginationland?" Butters asked. 4 heads nodded in confirmation. "Here goes nothing," Butters said, and shook the snow globe. For a moment, nothing happened. The tiny figures inside merely swirled among the glitter, settling back down in their miniature landscape. "I told you this was stupid," Cartman began, but his words were cut short as the room suddenly filled with blinding rainbow light. The boys felt the floor disappear beneath their feet. The sensation of falling overtook them, yet it wasn't frightening, more like floating gently on a summer breeze. Multicolored lights surrounded them as they descended through what felt like layers of reality, passing strange symbolic shapes and hearing distant, cheerful music growing steadily louder. With a soft thump, they landed on something springy and soft. As the rainbow light faded, the boys found themselves sitting on a field of vibrant purple grass, surrounded by candy-striped trees and flowers that changed colors as they watched. "Holy shit, it worked!" Stan exclaimed, looking around in wonder. "We're back in Imaginationland," Kyle added, helping Kenny to his feet. "It's just as awesome as I remembered," Butters said happily, spinning around to take in the fantastical landscape. Indeed, much of Imaginationland looked exactly as they remembered from their previous adventure. The bright blue sky was filled with floating islands and gentle creatures that looked like a cross between butterflies and kittens. In the distance stood the castle of the mayor, its towers and spires sparkling in the perpetual daylight. But as the boys looked more carefully, They could see what the keeper had warned them about. Patches of the landscape appeared faded, like old photographs left too long in the sun. Some areas seemed to be dissolving at the edges, revealing unsettling glimpses of empty grayness beyond. "Dude, look at that." Kyle pointed to what should have been the gumdrop forest, now partially transparent and flickering like a bad television signal. "Welcome back, Imaginations." A familiar voice called out. The boys turned to see the mayor of Imaginationland hurrying toward them, his colorful top hat bobbing with each step. Behind him came a procession of beloved imaginary characters: Aslan the Lion, Ronald McDonald, Luke Skywalker, Wonder Woman, and dozens of others. "Mayor," Butters ran forward to greet him. "We came to help. The Keeper of Pages told me what's happening." The mayor's usually cheerful face grew solemn. "Yes, the situation is quite dire. The lost pages are fragmenting our world. Come, we must hurry to the Council of Imagination." The mayor led the boys through the central part of Imaginationland, which still retained its vibrant colors and solidity. Citizens waved and cheered as they passed, clearly relieved to see the boys who had saved them from the evil imaginary characters years ago. "So where exactly are we going?" Stan asked as they approached the castle. "To the great library," the mayor explained. "It's where all stories are kept. The Keeper of Pages should be waiting for us there." "I thought the Keeper was just some old dude in the real world," Cartman said suspiciously. The mayor chuckled. "The Keeper exists wherever imagination needs him. He can move between your world and ours when necessary." They entered the castle and followed a winding corridor that seemed to stretch much further than the castle's exterior dimensions would allow. Finally, they reached an enormous set of doors made from what appeared to be solid gold, engraved with scenes from countless stories throughout human history. The doors swung open silently, revealing the most incredible library the boys had ever seen. Endless shelves stretched in all directions, even upward beyond where the ceiling should be. Books of every size floated through the air, some opening themselves to display three-dimensional scenes from their pages. In the center of the room stood a massive round table where various characters, from ancient mythology to modern cartoons, sat in deep discussion. "Ah, the boys from Colorado have arrived," said the Keeper of Pages, who sat at the head of the table. He looked exactly as he had on the hill in South Park, though perhaps more substantial and vibrant here in his home realm. "Whoa, it's like a super team of imaginary characters," Kyle whispered, recognizing Zeus, Sherlock Holmes, Spider-Man, and Harry Potter among those assembled. "Please take a seat." The keeper gestured to 5 empty chairs. The Council of Imagination was just discussing the crisis. As the boys sat down, they noticed a large book in the center of the table, similar to the one the keeper had shown Butters, but much bigger and more ornate. Its pages flipped by themselves, showing various realms of Imaginationland that were in different stages of dissolution. "As you can see," the keeper explained, "we are losing significant portions of our world. The Arabian Nights section has already gone completely dark. Mother Goose territory is fading fast. Even parts of Superhero City are beginning to flicker." "But people still read those stories," Kyle protested. "How can they be forgotten?" "It's not just about reading," Sherlock Holmes interjected, his voice precise and analytical. "It's about genuine imagination, the kind that comes from true engagement with stories, not passive consumption." Harry Potter nodded in agreement. "In your world, imagination is increasingly replaced by prepackaged entertainment. Children no longer need to imagine what a dragon looks like when they can see one perfectly rendered in high definition on a screen." "That doesn't sound so bad," Stan said uncertainly. "There's nothing wrong with visual media," the keeper clarified. "But when it completely replaces imaginative engagement, When children no longer create their own stories or envision their own versions of characters, that's when our world begins to fade. Zeus, imposing even while seated, leaned forward. And now we face a new threat. The Forgotten Ones have formed an alliance, led by characters so obscure that even we can barely remember who they once were. They have seized the lost pages, Spider-Man added, and are using them to create portals to your world. They believe if they can force real people to see them, even through fear, they will be remembered again. But that's not how healthy imagination works, the mayor said sadly. Being remembered out of fear only transforms them further, making them more monstrous. The keeper turned to the 5 boys. This is why we need your help. As children who have successfully navigated between worlds, your imaginations are particularly powerful. You can help us recover the lost pages and restore them to the book of all stories. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Cartman asked skeptically. The keeper gestured, and the book in the center of the table flipped to a new page showing a map of Imaginationland with several glowing spots marked in red. These are the locations where the lost pages have been hidden by the Forgotten Ones. Each page must be recovered and returned here. When all pages are restored, the Forgotten Realms can be stabilized. This sounds dangerous, Kyle said. What happens if we run into these Forgotten Ones? The keeper's expression grew grave. You must avoid them if possible. They appear as shadowy, distorted versions of what they once were. If confronted, you must try to remember what they originally were. If you can restore their true identity in your imagination, they will regain their form. But if we've never heard of them, how can we remember them? Stan asked. That's the challenge, the keeper admitted. For truly forgotten characters, you will need to use the beacon of memory. He produced a small crystal lantern that glowed with shifting colors. This can temporarily reveal a Forgotten One's original form, but its power is limited. Use it wisely. So we just go to these spots, grab some pages and come back here. Cartman summarized, making it sound simple. If only it were that easy, the mayor sighed. The lost pages are protected by puzzles and challenges designed to test imagination, and the areas where they're hidden are unstable. Reality shifts and changes as the pages fade. Plus, the Forgotten Ones will try to stop you, added Wonder Woman. They don't want to be restored to their original forms, if it means being potentially forgotten again. The keeper stood, his expression solemn yet hopeful. You 5 represent the imaginative potential of your generation. If anyone can restore the lost pages and save Imaginationland, it's you. Kenny mumbled a question through his hood. An excellent point, the keeper nodded as if he perfectly understood Kenny's muffled speech. Time works differently here. Though you may spend days in Imaginationland, only moments will pass in your world. That's good, Butters said with relief. I'd hate to get grounded for being missing too long. Very well, the keeper proclaimed. The council has prepared provisions and tools for your journey. He gestured to a nearby table where 5 backpacks sat, each a different color. Inside you'll find everything you might need for your quest. As the boys examined their new equipment, the keeper opened his book to a specific page showing a faded forest of twisted trees. Your first destination will be the Forgotten Forest, where the oldest lost page is hidden. The mayor will escort you to the boundary. The council members wish them luck, some offering specific advice or encouragement. As they prepared to leave, Stan turned to his friends with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Well, guys, looks like we're going on another crazy adventure. Just like old times, Kyle agreed with a smile. Let's just hope we don't die this time, Kenny mumbled. Don't worry, fellas, Butters said cheerfully. We've saved Imaginationland before. We can do it again. As they followed the mayor out of the great library, Cartman lagged behind, a calculating expression on his face. He had been unusually quiet during the council meeting, his mind clearly working on something. "Hey, Keeper," he asked, hanging back from the others. "If we save Imaginationland, do we get any special powers? Like, could I control reality with my imagination again?" The Keeper gave Cartman a knowing look. "Imagination is always powerful, Eric Cartman, but be careful what you wish for. Those who seek to control imagination often find themselves controlled by it instead." Cartman frowned at the cryptic response and hurried to catch up with his friends. As the five boys left the castle, the first stage of their quest to save Imaginationland was about to begin, with dangers and wonders alike waiting beyond the boundaries of the familiar territories. Imaginationland's Lost Pages. Chapter 3, The Forgotten Forest. The journey to the edge of Imaginationland's safe territories was like walking through a storybook that gradually turned into a half-finished sketch. The vibrant colors and solid structures of the central realm slowly gave way to increasingly faded landscapes. Trees became translucent, flowers flickered in and out of existence, and the ground itself sometimes rippled like disturbed water. "This is as far as I can safely go," the mayor announced as they reached what appeared to be the boundary between the stable part of Imaginationland and a forest of twisted, ghostly trees. "Beyond this point lies the Forgotten Forest, home to characters and stories that have begun to fade from human memory." Stan looked apprehensively at the forest ahead. Unlike the cheerful gumdrop forest or the whimsical wonder woods they'd seen on their previous visit, this place seemed melancholy and unsettling. The trees were gnarled and gray, their forms occasionally blurring as if they couldn't quite decide what shape to take. "What exactly are we looking for in there?" Kyle asked, adjusting the straps of his green backpack. The mayor pulled a small, ornate compass from his pocket. "This will guide you to the lost page. When you're close, the needle will spin faster." He handed the device to Butters, who accepted it with wide-eyed responsibility. "Remember," the mayor continued, "the Forgotten Ones might try to trick or frighten you. Use the beacon of memory if you must, but its power is limited." "What about our imaginations?" Stan asked. "Last time we were here, we could create stuff just by imagining it." "That power still exists," the mayor confirmed, "but it works differently in the fading regions. Your imagination can temporarily stabilize areas or even restore forgotten characters if you have a strong enough connection to them. But be careful. Imagination is unpredictable in unstable zones." "Great, more cryptic bullcrap," Cartman muttered. "Can we just get this over with?" With final words of encouragement from the mayor, the five boys stepped across the boundary. The sensation was immediate and strange, like walking through a curtain of static electricity that made their skin tingle and their thoughts feel slightly fuzzy. "Everyone stay together," Kyle said as they entered the forest proper. The sounds of Imaginationland, cheerful music, distant laughter, friendly character voices, faded behind them, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by occasional whispers that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Butters kept his eyes on the compass. "It's pointing this way," he said, indicating a barely visible path that wound between the gray trees. As they followed the path deeper into the forest, the boys began to notice strange things hanging from the branches: faded photographs, torn book pages, broken toys, and other objects that seemed to flicker between solidity and transparency. "What are those?" Stan asked, pointing to a cluster of items that looked like old VHS tapes with unreadable labels. "Physical manifestations of forgotten media," came a voice from behind them. The boys whirled around to find themselves face to face with a humanoid figure that hadn't been there a moment before. It looked almost like a man, tall and thin, wearing what might have once been a colorful suit, but was now mostly grayscale. His features were blurry, as if someone had taken an eraser to a detailed drawing, leaving just the general impression of a face. "Who are you?" Kyle asked cautiously. The figure tilted its head. I was a television host, I think. Children's programming in the 1970s. Or was it the 1980s? The being's voice sounded frustrated. I can't remember anymore, and neither can anyone in your world. Kenny reached slowly for the beacon of memory in his backpack, but the forgotten TV host raised a hand. No need for that, young man. I'm not here to harm you. Some of us forgotten ones just want to be remembered, not feared. He gestured at the forest around them. We live here, in the fading zones, trying to preserve what little identity we have left. That's sad, Butters said softly. The figure nodded. It is, but it's the natural cycle of imagination. New characters are born as others fade away. He pointed down the path. You're looking for the lost page, I assume. The council sent you. Stan stepped forward. Yeah, we're trying to save Imaginationland. Noble, the figure said with what might have been a smile. It was hard to tell with his blurred features. The page you seek is in the heart of the forest, guarded by the Forgotten King. He was once a beloved character in your world, a mascot for something. Toys, perhaps, or cereal. But now he's bitter about being discarded and replaced. Will he try to stop us? Kyle asked. Most certainly, the figure confirmed. He believes if the page remains hidden, the barrier between worlds will continue to weaken, allowing forgotten ones to cross over and force people to see them again. That doesn't sound like a great plan, Stan said. Desperation rarely breeds wisdom, the figure replied sadly. I can guide you part of the way, but be warned, the deeper we go, the more unstable reality becomes. Stay close together, and if something tries to separate you, use your shared memories as an anchor. As they followed their mysterious guide deeper into the forest, the environment grew increasingly surreal. Patches of ground would suddenly turn transparent, revealing an endless void below. Trees sometimes rearranged themselves when no one was looking directly at them. Occasionally, half-formed creatures, faded cartoon characters, mascots, or literary figures so obscure that none of the boys recognized them, would peek out from behind trees before dissolving back into the mist. This place is seriously fucked up, Cartman whispered, staying unusually close to Kyle and Stan. It's what happens when imagination fragments, their guide explained over his shoulder. Without the coherent structure provided by human memory and attention, fictional realities become unstable. The compass in Butter's hand began spinning more rapidly as they approached a clearing in the center of the forest. At its heart stood what might once have been a magnificent tree house, but was now a decaying, shifting structure that appeared to be made of forgotten toys, broken game pieces, and torn comic book pages. The Forgotten King's castle, their guide said, stopping at the edge of the clearing. This is where I must leave you. Be careful. He was once a character designed to appeal to children, but bitterness has twisted him. Wait, Kyle said. Can't you at least tell us your name? Maybe if we remember you, you could become more solid. The figure looked thoughtful. I was Captain something or Professor. It had to do with crafts or science experiments for kids. He shook his head. It's no use. Some forgetting is too complete. With that, he faded into the mist, leaving the boys alone at the edge of the clearing. Well, that was depressing, Stan said quietly. Look, Butters pointed to the compass, which was now spinning wildly. The lost page must be in that tree house. As they cautiously approached the structure, a voice boomed from above, once probably meant to be cheerful and welcoming, but now distorted by static and echoes. VISITORS, how delightful, come to steal my treasure have you. A figure leaped down from the tree house, landing with surprising agility before them. Like their guide, this being was mostly grayscale and blurry around the edges, but there was something more substantial about him, as if he clung more desperately to what remained of his identity. He wore what might have been a crown made of cereal pieces, and parts of his body seemed composed of various breakfast foods, though all colorless and indistinct. "The Forgotten King, I presume," Kyle said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Once I had another name," the figure bellowed. "Once I was on every breakfast table in America. Now look at me." He gestured to his fading form. "Replacdby newer, shinier mascots. Dude, are you like some old serial character?" Stan asked, trying to remember any discontinued breakfast mascots from before his time. The king seemed to flicker more solidly for a moment at Stan's attempt to remember him. "Yes, yes, I was. But the recollection slipped away and he growled in frustration. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that I have the lost page, and with it, I will force my way back into your world's memory." Kenny mumbled something to his friends, one hand reaching for the beacon of memory in his backpack. "Good idea," Kyle whispered back. While Stan kept the Forgotten King talking, Kenny quietly removed the glowing crystal lantern. "We just want to help restore Imaginationland," Stan was saying. "If you give us the page, maybe the Keeper can find a way to help you too." "Lies," the king roared. "The council would rather let us fade than acknowledge the cruelty of being forgotten. No, my plan is better. Once the barriers weaken enough, all forgotten ONES will flood your world." With a nod from Kyle, Kenny raised the beacon and activated it. A pulse of rainbow light washed over the Forgotten King, temporarily revealing his true form, a cartoonish character made of cereal pieces, with a friendly face and colorful crown. For just a moment, the boys could see the cheerful breakfast mascot he had once been. "I remember you," Butters suddenly exclaimed. "You were that cereal mascot from the early 90s. Captain Crunchberry or something." "No, not quite," the king said, his voice momentarily less distorted as Butters' attempt to remember him provided some stability. I was. Fruit King," Cartman unexpectedly chimed in. "From that healthy cereal nobody wanted to eat. My mom bought it like twice when I was really little." The king's form flickered between his forgotten state and a more colorful version. Yes, Fruit King cereal. "Start your day the royal way," he quoted his own catchphrase, sounding momentarily excited before anger returned. "But then they discontinued me. 20 years forgotten. Imaginationland's lost pages. Chapter 4. The Memory Labyrinth." While the king was distracted by this partial recognition, Stan motioned to the others. "The page must be inside the tree house. Let's split up. Cartman and I will keep him talking while you guys search for it." Kyle, Kenny, and Butters began to edge toward the structure, while Stan and Cartman engaged the Forgotten King in conversation, asking him about his cereal and commercials, each recollection making him briefly more solid and coherent. The treehouse interior was a chaotic mess of forgotten childhood items, broken action figures, discontinued board games, VHS tapes of canceled cartoons, and trading cards from collectible games no one played anymore. Everything was in grayscale, occasionally flickering with brief hints of color when examined closely. "The compass is going crazy," Butters whispered, watching the needle spin in complete circles. "It must be here somewhere," Kyle said, carefully searching through the debris. Kenny pointed to what appeared to be a child's diary buried under a pile of faded comic books. Unlike everything else in the room, it seemed to be fighting against the grayscale effect, occasional bursts of color pulsing from its cover. "That has to be it," Kyle agreed, reaching for the book. As his fingers touched the cover, the entire tree house shuddered violently. Outside, they heard the Forgotten King roar in fury. "He's taking the page. Stop them." The three boys raced back outside with the diary to find Stan and Cartman backing away from the increasingly agitated king. who was now summoning other forgotten ones from the forest. Shadowy, indistinct figures were emerging from between the trees, their forms even less defined than the king's. "We got it," Kyle shouted, holding up the diary. "Let's go." But the forgotten ones had already formed a circle around them, blocking their escape. The king advanced menacingly. "I've guarded that page for DECADES. It's mine." Kenny mumbled something urgently, pointing back the way they'd come. The path was now barely visible, but it was their only chance. With a nod from Stan, the five boys made a break for it, dashing through a gap between two faded cartoon characters. The forest around them seemed to come alive with pursuit, branches reaching out to grab them, the ground shifting beneath their feet. Behind them, the Forgotten King's bellows echoed through the trees. "You can't escape. These woods know every forgotten route." "He's right," Butters panted as they ran. "The compass is going crazy. I can't tell which way leads back to the boundary." As they burst through a thicket, the boys skidded to a halt. Before them stretched not the forest path they expected, but an enormous labyrinth made of what appeared to be shifting walls of static, each section occasionally resolving into glimpses of old TV shows, discontinued toys, or forgotten cartoon characters. "What the hell is this?" Cartman exclaimed. "The memory labyrinth," came a familiar voice. The faded TV host from earlier stepped out from behind a wall of static. "It appears when forgotten ones feel threatened. It's a defense mechanism. A maze built from half-remembered fragments that constantly rearranges itself." "How do we get through it?" Stan asked urgently, glancing behind them as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. "You must navigate using your own memories as anchors," the guide explained. "Find fragments you recognize, no matter how vaguely, and use them to stabilize your path. But be warned, the labyrinth feeds on childhood nostalgia. It will try to trap you in pleasant memories, keeping you here until you too begin to fade." A howl of rage from nearby told them the Forgotten King was closing in. "Go," the faded host urged. "I'll try to delay them." With no other choice, the boys plunged into the labyrinth. Immediately, the entrance sealed behind them, walls of static shifting to block their retreat. "Stay together," Kyle warned, clutching the lost page tightly. "If we get separated in here, we might never find each other again." The memory labyrinth was disorienting, in a way none of them had experienced before. Corridors would stretch impossibly long before suddenly shrinking. Walls would become transparent only to solidify again when approached, and everywhere were fragments of forgotten media. Theme songs playing on endless loops, characters repeating catchphrases out of context, toys demonstrating features that no child had played with in decades. "Is it just me, or does this place feel really sad?" Butters asked softly as they passed a section of wall showing a cartoon dog forlornly repeating, "They loved me once," over and over. "It's not just you," Stan replied, averting his eyes from the depressing sight. "This whole place is like where childhood things go to die." "Well, I'm not dying in here," Cartman declared, pushing ahead. "Hey, look at this." He pointed to a wall where images of old video games were playing. Pixelated characters from the 90s, jumping and collecting coins in games none of them had ever seen. "I don't recognize any of these," Kyle said, frowning. "Wait, that one." Stan pointed to a game showing some kind of dinosaur skateboarding. "I think my dad mentioned that game once. Something about a radical dinosaur." As soon as Stan made the connection, that section of wall solidified slightly, the static clearing to show the game more clearly. "Tyrannoskate, radical reptile." "Good job, Stan," Kyle exclaimed. The guide was right. When we recognize something, it becomes more stable. They continued through the labyrinth, each boy occasionally spotting something vaguely familiar. A fast food mascot that had been discontinued before they were born, but whose merchandise lingered in a cousin's bedroom. a Saturday morning cartoon that had aired for only one season when they were toddlers, a breakfast cereal with a robot theme that had been on supermarket shelves for just a few months. With each recognition, their path became clearer, corridors solidifying long enough for them to pass through. But the labyrinth fought back, trying to tempt them with pleasant diversions. A wall that transformed into an arcade with all their favorite games, a corridor that led to what looked like an unlimited candy store, a room filled with the latest toys and game consoles. "Don't stop," Kyle reminded them when Cartman was drawn toward the candy. "It's trying to trap us." After what felt like hours of navigation, though time seemed meaningless in the labyrinth, they reached what appeared to be a central chamber. Unlike the rest of the maze, this space was perfectly circular, with dozens of doorways leading off in all directions. In the center stood a small pedestal holding a large book. "Another lost page?" Butters asked, approaching cautiously. Kenny mumbled something, pointing at the book and shaking his head. "Kenny's right," Stan said. "It doesn't look like a lost page, it's more like some kind of index." Kyle stepped forward and opened the book. Inside were listings, thousands of them, each one paired with a location in the labyrinth. Some entries were clearly legible, while others were faded or completely blurred out. "It's a catalog," Kyle realized, "of everything that's been forgotten. Look," he pointed to a page where Fruit King cereal was listed with Forgotten Forest, Northern Sector beside it. "So what? How does this help us get out of here?" Cartman demanded. Butters suddenly gasped. "Fellas, look." He pointed to a page where exit to Central Imaginationland was clearly listed. "There's our way out." "But which door leads there?" Stan asked, looking at the dozens of identical exits. Kenny mumbled again, gesturing urgently at the book. "You're right," Kyle agreed. "We need to find our own entries in this catalog. If we're in here, we must be listed somewhere." They flipped through the massive tome, searching for their own names or anything related to South Park. Finally, on a page near the end, they found it. South Park boys Stan Marsh, Kyle Broflovsky, Eric Cartman, Kenny McCormick, Leopold Butters Stotch. Last visit. Terrorist attack and reality breach. Central access portal 42. There, Stan pointed to the corresponding doorway, marked with a small 42 above it. But as they moved toward the exit, the air in the chamber rippled, and the Forgotten King materialized before them, now accompanied by several other faded characters. A cowboy with half his features missing, a princess whose crown and dress kept changing design, and what might once have been a beloved cartoon mouse, now twisted into something unrecognizable. "Thought you could escape," the Forgotten King growled. "The labyrinth serves us. It would never show you the true exit. We just want to restore Imaginationland," Kyle said, holding up the lost page they'd taken from the tree house. "This belongs in the book of all stories, not hidden away. If the pages are restored, the barriers strengthen," the cowboy character said, his voice flickering between accents. "We will never cross over. But crossing over won't make people remember you," Butters said with surprising firmness. "It'll just scare them, and that's not how imagination is supposed to work." "What choice do we have?" the princess demanded, her appearance shifting between blonde and brunette, her age changing with each flicker. "To fade completely." Kenny stepped forward and pulled down his hood, something he rarely did. His voice, unimpeded by the orange fabric, was clear as he addressed the Forgotten Ones. "Maybe there's another way," he said. "What if? What if you came with us? Back to the council? Maybe they could find a place for you in stable Imaginationland, somewhere you wouldn't have to fade." The Forgotten King hesitated, his grayscale form flickering as he considered this. "The council would never allow it," the mouse character hissed. "They fear us becoming like them." "Them?" Stan asked. "The corrupted ones," the Forgotten King said, his voice momentarily less distorted. those who were forgotten so completely they became something else, something that hates all imagination, both remembered and forgotten. A distant roar shook the labyrinth, causing walls to shimmer and portions of the ceiling to dissolve temporarily. "They're coming," the cowboy said nervously. "They can sense the lost page." "Then help us get out of here," Kyle urged. "Come with us to the council, we'll speak for you." The forgotten characters exchanged looks, their forms flickering with uncertainty. I remember when children loved me," the forgotten king said quietly. "When they would beg their parents for my cereal just to see mycommercials. I don't want to be a monster, I just want to be remembred." Before anyone could respond, a portion of the labyrinth wall exploded inward. Through the breach surged creatures unlike anything the boys had seen, not merely faded or grayscale like the forgotten ones, but actively hostile to form itself. They appeared as swirling voids with occasional glimpses of what might have once been features, a eye here, part of a smile there, twisted into expressions of rage and hatred. "The corrupted!" the princess screamed. "Run!" Without hesitation, the forgotten king pointed to doorway 42. "Go, hold them off." The five boys didn't need to be told twice. They charged through the door as the forgotten characters formed a defensive line against the encroaching corruption. Beyond the doorway stretched a tunnel of rapidly shifting imagery, a chaotic blur of everything the boys had experienced in Imaginationland, both from their previous adventure and their current one. The sensation was like falling through their own memories, occasionally catching glimpses of moments they'd shared together. With a flash of rainbow light and the sensation of sudden decompression, they tumbled out onto solid ground. Looking up, they found themselves at the edge of central Imaginationland, exactly where they had first entered the Forgotten Forest. The mayor and several council members rushed forward to greet them, expressions of relief clear on their faces. "You made it back," the mayor exclaimed, "and you have the lost page." Kyle handed over the diary-like object, which now glowed with increasing brightness as it neared the center of Imaginationland. "We need to go back for them," Stan said urgently. "The forgotten characters, they helped us escape. They're fighting the corrupted ones." The Keeper of Pages stepped forward, his expression grave. "The corrupted are the most dangerous entities in all of Imaginationland. They are what happens when forgetting becomes complete. They no longer wish to be remembered. They wish to destroy all imagination, both remembered and forgotten." "But we promised we'd help the forgotten ones," Butters insisted. "They're not bad, they're just sad and scared." The keeper exchanged looks with the mayor, a silent communication passing between them. Perhaps there is a way," the mayor said slowly. "If we could stabilize enough of the lost pages, we might be able to create a new region, a twilight realm where the forgotten could exist without fading completely, even if they are never fully remembered again. But we'd need more lost pages," the keeper added. "And the next one is hidden in the most dangerous region of all, the void of corrupted imagination." The boys looked at each other. They were tired, shaken from their ordeal in the labyrinth, but the thought of abandoning the forgotten king and his companions to the corrupted was unthinkable. "We'll do it," Stan said firmly. "But we need to rest first, and we need to know what we're really up against. What exactly are these corrupted, and why do they hate imagination so much?" The keeper's expression darkened. "To understand that, you need to know the true history of Imaginationland, and the dark secret that the council has kept hidden for generations." An ominous rumble shook the ground beneath their feet, as if Imaginationland itself was nervous about what was about to be revealed. In the distance, toward the fading regions, storm clouds were gathering, not ordinary weather, but a tempest of corrupted imagination that threatened to engulf everything in its path. The final confrontation was approaching, and the fate of all imagination, both remembered and forgotten, would soon rest in the hands of 5 boys from South Park. Imaginationland's Lost Pages. Chapter 5. The final chapter. A hush fell over the council chamber as the keeper of pages unrolled an ancient scroll across the massive table. The boys, refreshed after a few hours of rest and a meal of imaginarily perfect foods, gathered around with the mayor and other council members. "Before you face the void of corrupted imagination," the keeper began, "you must understand what we're truly dealing with." He gestured to the scroll, which depicted a timeline of Imaginationland's history. Imaginationland was not always divided between remembered and forgotten. Once, all imagined things existed in harmony, regardless of how many humans remembered them. "So what changed?" Kyle asked, studying the illustrations on the scroll. The keeper pointed to a dark spot on the timeline. "The Great Forgetting. As human technology evolved and entertainment became increasingly passive, a massive wave of forgetting swept through our realm. Characters and stories that had existed for generations suddenly found themselves fading, as fewer minds actively imagined them. Most forgotten characters accepted their fate with dignity," the mayor added. "They retreated to the fading zones, where they could at least exist in a diminished form. But some refused to fade," the keeper continued, his finger moving to an ominous illustration showing shadowy figures. "They became bitter, angry at being discarded. The most severely forgotten eventually transformed into the corrupted, entities that no longer wish to be remembered, but instead seek to destroy all imagination as revenge for their abandonment." "That's pretty dark for Imaginationland," Stan commented. "Yeah, I thought this place was all rainbow farts and lollipop dreams," Cartman added. The keeper shook his head solemnly. "Imagination encompasses all possibilities, both wondrous and terrible. The corrupted represent imagination's capacity for nihilism and despair. And now they're led by the most dangerous, corrupted one of all," the mayor said gravely. "A character so completely forgotten that no record remains of what it once was. We know it only as the Void." "The Void," Butters squeaked nervously. "It is like a black hole of anti-imagination," the keeper explained. "It consumes creative energy and replaces it with emptiness. If it were to reach central Imaginationland, all would be lost, not just here, but in your world too. Human imagination would be severely damaged, perhaps permanently." Kenny mumbled a question through his parka. "Yes," the keeper nodded. "The lost page in the Void's domain is the most important of all. It contains the original story, the first tale ever imagined by humans, from which all other stories ultimately derive." "So what's the plan?" Stan asked. "We just walk into this void place and ask for the page nicely?" "Not exactly," the mayor said. "The final lost page is hidden within the Void's fortress, at the heart of the corrupted realm. The forgotten ones you befriended might help you reach it, but ultimately you'll need to confront the Void itself." "And how are we supposed to fight something that literally eats imagination?" Kyle asked skeptically. The keeper reached into his robes and produced 5 small crystal-like objects. "With these, imagination anchors. They're formed from the purest creative energy in Imaginationland. As long as you carry them, the corrupted cannot completely negate your imaginative powers. Basically, they're like imagination condoms," Cartman summarized crudely. "They protect us from catching the nothingness." The keeper winced but didn't disagree with the analogy. "In essence, yes. There's something else you should know," the mayor added hesitantly. "When the Void consumes imagination, that creative energy has to go somewhere. We believe it's building towards something, a negation so powerful it could potentially erase the boundary between Imaginationland and your world completely." "Wait, so the Void could enter our world?" Kyle asked, alarmed. "Not physically," the keeper clarified, but its essence could spread, a pandemic of creative nihilism, causing humans to lose interest in imagination altogether. Jesus Christ, Stan muttered. Indeed, the keeper agreed solemnly. The stakes could not be higher. The council spent the next hour planning the mission, drawing maps of the known parts of the corrupted realm and strategizing approaches to the Void's fortress. By the time they finished, the boys were equipped with their imagination anchors, backpacks full of supplies, and as much knowledge as the council could provide. As they prepared to depart, the Forgotten King and his companions, the princess, cowboy, and cartoon mouse, emerged from the forest edge, looking battered but intact. Their forms were slightly more stable now, as if their brave stand against the corrupted had somehow reinforced their identities. "You spoke for us to the council?" the Forgotten King asked, his voice less distorted than before. "We did," Butters confirmed. "They're going to create a special place for forgotten characters if we can get all the lost pages back. We need your help to reach the Void's fortress," Stan added. "Will you guide us?" The forgotten characters exchanged glances, clearly apprehensive about returning to the corrupted realm. "We will take you to the edge of the Void's domain," the Forgotten King finally agreed. "But we cannot enter the fortress. The Void. It does something worse than forgetting to those ITCAPTURES." With their unlikely allies alongside them, the boys set off toward the darkest region of Imaginationland. The journey took them through increasingly unstable territories, landscapes that collapsed into nothingness behind them, regions where colors ceased to exist, and finally a barren plain where even the concept of dimension seemed tenuous. At the edge of this plain stood a massive fortress. Though fortress didn't quite capture its nature, it was more like a wound in reality itself, a structure that simultaneously existed and didn't exist, its architecture defying logic in ways that made the boys' eyes hurt. "This is as far as we go," the Forgotten King announced, his form flickering anxiously. "The Void's power is too strong beyond this point." "Thanks for getting us here," Kyle said sincerely. "If we succeed, we'll make sure the council keeps its promise about creating a place for you." The cowboy character tipped his half-visible hat. "You boys have real grit. Don't let the Void get in your heads. That's how it wins, making you question whether imagination matters at all." With final words of encouragement from their faded guides, the 5 boys approached the impossible fortress. Their imagination anchors glowed softly as they neared, creating a protective bubble around them. The entrance to the fortress wasn't a door but an absence, a place where the structure simply failed to exist. Stepping through this non-entrance felt like walking through a membrane of cold jelly, leaving the boys disoriented as they found themselves inside. The interior defied description, corridors that bent in directions that shouldn't exist, rooms that were simultaneously vast and claustrophobic, and throughout it all, a pervasive sense of wrongness that made thinking difficult. "Stay focused," Stan reminded everyone. "Remember why we're here." They navigated through the impossible space, guided by their imagination anchors, which seemed to tug them in the direction of the lost page. Occasionally they encountered corrupted ones, entities so thoroughly forgotten they appeared as animate voids, their forms like tears in reality. The creatures recoiled from the light of the anchors, allowing the boys to pass. Finally, they reached what seemed to be the center of the fortress, a vast chamber that somehow felt empty despite being filled with shadowy figures. At its center, suspended in midair, was an ancient-looking book, its pages flipping by themselves in a non-existent wind. "That must be the original story," Kyle whispered. "But where's the Void itself?" Stan wondered. As if in answer, the shadows in the chamber began to converge, flowing together into a single entity that loomed before them. Unlike the other corrupted ones, which maintained some vague semblance of their original forms, This being was pure negation, an absence so profound it was painful to look at. Who dares enter my domain? The voice wasn't heard so much as felt, a vibration that made the boys' teeth ache and their thoughts scatter. Cartman, surprisingly, was the first to step forward. "We're here for the lost page, Captain Buzzkill. Hand it over and nobody gets hurt." The void seemed to ripple with what might have been amusement. Brave words from such a small imagination. Do you even understand what you're looking at? Ericcartman. The boys froze. It knew Cartman's name. "I am the collective void of all forgotten things," the entity continued. "Every abandoned story, every discarded character, every creative impulse supprsscd or ignored. I am their absence, their negation, their revenge." "Yeah, well, you're also a big buzzkill," Cartman retorted, though his voice wavered slightly. "Why fight for imagination?" the void asked, its non-form shifting to address each boy individually. "In the end, all things are forgotten, all stories conclude, all imagination fades into nothing." Kenny mumbled something defiant through his parka. "Immortality through stories," the void rippled again. "A consoling fantasy. Humans forget, KENNYMCCORMICK. They always forget." "Not everything," Stan objected. "Some stories last for thousands of years. Mere moments in the span of time," the void dismissed. "Even your precious, CLASSICS, will one day be forgotten when humanity itself is gone." While the void was distracted by philosophical debate, Butters had been inching toward the floating book. His imagination anchor glowed brighter as he approached, seemingly resonating with the original story. "And you, LEOPOLDSTOTCH," the void suddenly addressed him. "The boy who believes in everything, who trusts so easily. What will you do when your friends forget you? When your childish optimism is crushed by reality?" Butters froze, momentarily overwhelmed by the void's attention, but then a determined expression crossed his face. "You know what? Maybe everything does get forgotten eventually," Butters said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. My grandma used to make me cookies that nobody else ever tasted, and now she's gone, and nobody will ever have those exact cookies again. But they still mattered to me." The void seemed to recoil slightly from Butters' passionate declaration. "He's right," Kyle joined in. "Imagination isn't about lasting forever. It's about creating moments that mean something, even if they're eventually forgotten." "Just because something ends doesn't make it pointless," Stan added. "That's like saying there's no point in eating ice cream because eventually you finish the cone." The void pulsed angrily, the shadows around it writhing. "Sentimental nonsense. I will show you the truth of forgetting." It surged forward, engulfing the boys in its nothingness. Inside the void, they experienced the sensation of being erased, memories fading, identities dissolving, the very concept of selfhood becoming tenuous. But their imagination anchors flared in response, creating bubbles of creative energy that protected each boy from complete negation. Within these bubbles, they could still think, still imagine, still remember who they were. "Dude, this is seriously messed up." Cartman's voice somehow reached the others through the nothingness. "The anchors are protecting us," Kyle called back, "but I don't know how long they'll last." "We need to get to the original story," Stan shouted. "Butters, can you still see it?" "I think so," Butters replied. Within the nothingness, he could just barely make out a glimmer that might be the book. He began moving toward it, feeling the others following his lead. As they struggled through the void's essence, strange images flashed through their minds. Forgotten characters pleading to be remembered, abandoned story ideas seeking expression, creative impulses that had been suppressed or ignored. The collective pain of all forgotten imagination assaulted their senses. It's using our own minds against us, Kyle realized, trying to make us give up on imagination by showing us its inevitable end. Well, screw that, Cartman declared. I've got too many sweet ideas for the future to let some emo-nothing cloud stop me. Somehow, through sheer stubbornness and the power of their anchors, they reached the original story. The book glowed more brightly as they approached, as if recognizing their presence. "How do we get it back to the council?" Stan asked, his voice strained from the effort of existing within the void. Kenny mumbled something, pointing to his anchor. "Kenny's right," Kyle said. "The anchors are pure imagination energy. If we combine them with the book, maybe we can create enough creative force to repel the void." It was their only chance. The five boys pressed their glowing anchors against the ancient tome. Immediately, a reaction began, light pouring from the connection points, colorful energy swirling around them in a tornado of pure imagination. The void shrieked, a sound like the universe itself being torn. "What are you doing?" "Remembering," Butters shouted back. "Remembering everything, even the forgotten stuff." The combined power of the anchors and the original story created an expanding sphere of pure creative energy that pushed back against the void's nothingness. Within this sphere, forgotten characters briefly regained their forms, lost stories played out in fleeting glimpses, and abandoned ideas flared with renewed possibility. "It changes nothing," the void insisted, though its voice sounded weaker. "All will still ultimately be forgotten." "Maybe," Stan acknowledged, "but right now in this moment we remember, and that's enough." With a sound like reality itself sighing with relief, the sphere of imagination expanded explosively. The void's essence was forced back, its non-form dispersing like smoke in a strong wind. The boys found themselves standing once again in the fortress chamber, the original story clutched in Butters' hands. Around them, the impossible architecture was beginning to collapse, as if the void's will had been the only thing holding it together. "We need to get out of here," Kyle shouted over the sound of unreality crumbling. They ran through disintegrating corridors, navigating by instinct as the fortress collapsed behind them. Finally, they burst through the non-entrance and out onto the barren plain, where the forgotten characters waited anxiously. "You did it!" the Forgotten King exclaimed, his form now significantly more stable and colorful. Around him, other Forgotten Ones were emerging from hiding, their forms likewise strengthened by the wave of remembering that had emanated from the fortress. "The original story," Butters panted, holding up the ancient book. "We got it." They watched as the void's fortress imploded, folding in on itself until nothing remained but a small dark spot on the landscape. Not gone completely, but significantly diminished. "It's not destroyed," the cartoon mouse observed, "just weakened." "Some forgetting is inevitable," the princess added, her form now settled into a definite appearance rather than constantly shifting. "But perhaps now there can be balance." The journey back to Central Imaginationland was much faster than their outward trek. The territories they passed through were stabilizing, the boundaries between remembered and forgotten becoming less harsh and more permeable. By the time they reached the council's castle, the entire realm seemed brighter and more vibrant. The keeper and the mayor greeted them at the gates, their faces lighting up at the sight of the original story. "You've done it," the keeper exclaimed. "And just in time." In the great library, they placed the original story alongside the other recovered lost pages. As the final page was restored to the book of all stories, a wave of golden light spread outward through Imaginationland. Fading zones solidified, forgotten characters regained definition, and the barriers between different regions became softer, allowing movement between them. "The restoration is complete," the mayor announced joyfully. "Imaginationland is whole once more, not divided between remembered and forgotten, but united in a spectrum of imagination." The Forgotten King stepped forward, his form now almost fully colorful and solid. "And our place in this new Imaginationland." The keeper smiled warmly. "As promised, we have created the Twilight Realm, a place for characters who are no longer actively remembered but are not forgotten enough to fade completely. There, you can exist in peace, occasionally visiting other realms when memories of you resurface in the human world." "And the corrupted?" Kyle asked. "Some have been restored to their original forms by the wave of remembering you generated," the keeper explained. "Others remain as they were, but contained within a small region where they can do no harm. The void itself still exists. Some forgetting is inevitable after all, but its power has been greatly diminished." Celebrations broke out across Imaginationland as news of the restoration spread. Characters from every realm, from the brightest, most popular icons to the obscure, nearly forgotten figures, mingled freely in the streets of the Central Kingdom. As evening fell, the boys found themselves honored guests at a grand feast in the mayor's castle. Every imaginable food was served, music played, and characters from throughout human history offered their thanks to the 5 kids from South Park. "So I guess our job here is done," Stan said, leaning back in his chair after his 7th serving of Imagination-perfect ice cream. "Seems like it," Kyle agreed. "Imaginationland is saved, the Forgotten Ones have a home, and the void is contained. Plus, we got to skip school for what feels like days," Cartman added, stuffing another imagination cookie into his mouth. Kenny mumbled something through his parka that made the others laugh. "You know, fellas," Butters said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about what the Void said, about how everything gets forgotten eventually." "Don't tell me you're still hung up on that depressing crap," Cartman groaned. "No, no," Butters shook his head. "I was just thinking. Even if things do get forgotten, that doesn't mean they didn't matter. All these characters in Imaginationland, they made someone happy once, even if just for a little while. And that's pretty neat, don't you think?" The boys considered this, watching the joyful celebrations around them. "That's actually pretty profound, Butters," Kyle admitted. As the night wound down, the Keeper of Pages approached their table. "It's time for you to return home. Your parents will be wondering where you are." "But we've been gone for days," Stan pointed out. "Won't we be in huge trouble?" The Keeper smiled mysteriously. "Remember, time works differently between our worlds. In your reality, barely an hour has passed since you left Butter's bedroom. They said their goodbyes to the mayor, the Forgotten King and his companions, and the many characters they'd encountered on their adventure. As a parting gift, the Keeper presented Butters with a small snow globe, similar to the one that had brought them to Imaginationland, but with an important difference. "This globe will not open a portal," the Keeper explained. "But if you ever wish to see how Imaginationland is faring, simply shake it and think of us. You'll glimpse our world, though you cannot enter." The journey home was gentler than their arrival had been, a soft rainbow light enveloping them, the sensation of floating upward, and then the solid reality of Butter's bedroom materializing around them. The snow globe from the Keeper sat on Butter's desk, showing a perfect miniature of the restored Imaginationland within its glass dome. Beside it lay Butter's diorama from school, simple and child-made, yet somehow capturing the essence of the magical realm they just saved. "Well, that was pretty cool," Stan said, breaking the silence. "Yeah," Kyle agreed. "Way better than playing video games all afternoon." Cartman stretched and headed for the door. "I don't know about you guys, but near annihilation by a void of nothingness has made me hungry. I'm going home for dinner." Kenny mumbled agreement and followed him out. As Stan and Kyle prepared to leave as well, Butters picked up the snow globe, giving it a gentle shake. Inside, tiny figures moved about their business in a realm where imagination itself was the foundation of reality. "You coming, Butters?" Stan asked from the doorway. Yeah, Butters smiled, carefully placing the globe back on his desk. I'm coming. That night, as the boys of South Park slept in their beds, their dreams were more vivid than usual, filled with impossible landscapes, forgotten characters, and adventures that defied logic. In Imaginationland, these dreams manifested as new regions, fresh stories, and revitalized characters. For imagination never truly dies as long as someone, somewhere, remembers to imagine, even if only in dreams. The end.